I should say that was all with a lot of help from my friends, so, which I'll get to in a little bit. So good morning. We have a nice, small, intimate crowd, so I'm not going to do a very long talk, but I thought we could also then have, lots of time for discussion and questions and things. So we'll see where this all takes us. So I was thinking about this talk. I was trying to think about what to talk about, but in the end I sort of realized that I kept coming back to thinking about what I've learned from the time I've spent working both with and in museums. And I guess you could almost say I was born to life in museums. My mother's an art historian who was the director for historic house museums, and my father's an architect who taught industrial design as well as architecture. And when I was in the 4th grade, my parents took my sister and I out of school for the better part of a year to travel through Europe in a green VW pop-up van like this one. In one very memorable moment during the trip, we were at the Picasso Museum, surrounded by nude paintings from Picasso's Blue Period when the lights went out. And when you're in the 4th grade and that happens, those paintings are forever ingrained in your memory. But by the time we got back from the trip, I swore that I was, never wanted to set foot in another museum or cathedral again, and I never, ever wanted to talk about space and light again. So imagine my parents' great surprise when I announced that I was going to be an art history major in college. I think my mother almost had a coronary. But then when I graduated, I really wasn't sure, what was I going to do next. And I think perhaps the expected course would have been to continue with art history and eventually lead into a job as a curator. And if I had been a curator, I would have focused on the Northern Baroque period from the time of Vermeer. This was my favorite period of art. And it's that damn light and space again, I think. But that career choice seems so specialized to me, and I wasn't sure that that's really the direction that I wanted to take. So I started thinking about and exploring some other options. So there was a brand new program that was starting in museum exhibit planning and design, and it really appealed to me because it brought together a number of different things that I was really interested in. It was 3D design and 2D design, content, conservation, lighting design. My father had actually created the program without really thinking that I would end up taking it, but somehow this ended up making it feel more tailored to my interests. It was almost like he had created it for me. And when I went looking for a summer internship as part of the program, I really had one criteria, and that was I was very interested in working internally within a museum, and I really didn't have any interest in working in a design firm. However, as these things usually go when you make a decision like that, the internship I ended up getting was with a museum exhibition design firm in New York. And I ended up working there for 10 years. And so when I first started my internship, the firm was in the process of working for the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. This was a really exciting time to be part of the firm because this museum marked a real turning point in exhibition design. There was a real narrative to the physical design of the space that reinforced the narrative of the content in a way that really hadn't been done before. Even the sense of smell from old shoe leather and wooden rail cars played a role in conveying the information. And one of my first jobs as an intern was to catalog the images as they came into the office. So many of these images that came in were really very difficult and emotional to look at. And I found that I really had to sort of develop some mechanisms for not getting overwhelmed by the content in front of me. It's very different when you're walking through a completed exhibition where you have some sense based on the narrative of what's happening, of what might be coming next. But when you're sort of opening a package of images that had no idea what's in it, each time it was sort of being overwhelmed by what you were looking at. I became particularly attached to the image of one boy from this village that was wiped out, and I made sure that the designers placed him at eye level in the installation so I can occasionally go back and visit him. And after the internship, I was offered a full-time job as a content coordinator, and that basically means managing the flow of images, text, graphic panels, and things like that. But I'd always been more focused on graphic design and media. And after a couple of years, the project director that I was working with really gave me the opportunity to do some of the graphic design on his exhibits. This is an image from the very first exhibition where I was the graphic designer. And it was a temporary open storage installation at the North Carolina Museum of History. It's always somewhat painful to go back and look at your first project. There it is. And another project I did was for the Museum of African American History in Detroit. And this was a really interesting project because they were moving from a very small museum to a much larger museum, and they really had very few artifacts. And in fact, part of the idea of the permanent installation was to get people to sort of open their attics and pull out material that would then be sent to the museum. So this exhibition was really made up primarily of graphic panels and media. And this project also led to more hands-on involvement with the media production itself. And so following this project, I went to work for a video production company for a year. This was amazing and great on-the-job training, but I really missed working for museums too much. So I ended up returning to RIA to start their media department. And in some cases, for that, my job was to produce the media for the exhibitions, and in others to coordinate between the museum clients, the internal RIA design team, and the outside video and interactive production companies. And so during the time that I ran the department, I was a media coordinator on projects like the Hall of Planet Earth at the American Museum of Natural History here in New York. And for this exhibition, there were over 20 media pieces in the exhibition, some that I developed, including the 3 videos shown embedded in the graphic panels here, and some the museum's media department developed, and others were developed by outside firms. And I was also working on a number of websites for different museums, including the National Building Museum in Washington, D.C. And so, like many of us working online, I really learned how to develop for the web while on the job and from other more experienced people. And for this project, I did the design and some of the Flash programming, but the heavy programming was done by another firm that we collaborated with on several projects. And in all of the projects I did at RIA, I think what I really appreciated the most was the opportunity to learn from incredibly knowledgeable people about a wide range of topics, from the American Revolution to African American history to earth sciences. And I think one of my fondest memories was, realizing that I just spent the entire afternoon listening to Neil deGrasse Tyson from the Natural Museum of Natural History, just waxing poetic about the planets as we were preparing for the exhibits. And at the end of the day, I thought, there are definitely much worse ways you can spend your day at work. So it's fascinating to listen to. But I also enjoyed the opportunity not only to work with the team at the museum, but the fact that as the media coordinator, I was working within a design firm, but able to work with other design firms. And so this image shows one of the kiosk projects that the interactive company Funny Garbage designed and developed for us. And I also appreciated the chance to learn about how different internal museum teams were set up, but at the same time being able to maintain the perspective of an outsider. But what I found sort of frustrating was the fact that when one project was over, we'd move immediately on to the next one. And because many of the museums that we worked with weren't in the immediate area, the opportunity to see how those exhibits transitioned over time was somewhat limited. We weren't really living with the exhibitions ourselves, so we had no way of seeing really what worked or didn't work on a daily basis. So after 10 years at RIA, I decided maybe I'd explored enough jobs at one firm, so I started looking around for my next move, which was kind of a scary prospect given that I had a very particular education and career path so far. And through actually the luck of good timing and one very fortuitous search on monster.com, I happened to start my job search just as MoMA was posting a job for with a particular set of skills that I actually had. So when I started here, I think I was, admittedly somewhat nervous about going from working with lots of different museums to really focusing on one museum all the time. But in many respects, I think the situation is still very much the same. I oversee the digital media team. We work with different departments across the museum on a variety of projects that have a wide range of subject matter. And there's still that opportunity to learn from content experts. They just all happen to specialize in modern and contemporary art. And the projects that RIA did were mostly history, social history, and science museums. museums that had a lot of interpretive panels and media in them. And moving to an art museum where there's less interpretation in the exhibitions themselves means that more of that supporting material is online and done through media. So some of the projects I've worked on since I started include 2 redesigns of the website, the most recent one on the right there, numerous exhibition and audience-specific sites, and display screen, mobile, and kiosk programs. Our department does a lot of the work on MoMA.org ourselves in order to be able to manage and grow the site in a coherent way. We are, after all, the ones who have to live with it, with what works and what doesn't work. But we also work with a lot of outside consultants and companies on developing key components of the site. We work with a company in England to develop the back end for our online collection, and Sean, who is here, has been working with us on the social bar aspect from the bottom of the screen there. And the exhibition sites in particular provide us with the opportunity to work with outside design firms and give us a chance to explore new design and interface ideas. You know, we've been able to hire a number of designers and firms whose work I greatly admire, including Yugo Nakamura, who did the design in the Elastic Mind site for us. And looking back, I'd say, you know, that earlier nervousness that I had about working for one museum almost seems kind of laughable now. There's really no end of new projects and ideas to pursue, as well as interesting people to collaborate with, both within the museum and beyond. And while it's been 7 years so far, I feel in many ways we've just begun. You know, I don't know what the future will bring, but I do feel incredibly privileged to get to work with the people and artwork here and to think about new ways to make those resources available to others. And on that note, I should point out that a couple of the amazing and fabulous digital media team are here, including Shannon Darrow, who's our senior media developer, and Chiara Bernasconi, who is our project manager, as well as our colleague Julia Hoffman, who is the very talented creative director of advertising and graphic design. So I'm sure that they can all help to answer questions as well. So thank you for listening.